Welcome to our 115th day on the trail. We have three readings for today from John chapter 4, verses 1 through 45, Numbers 22, verse 41 through 23:30, and 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 1 through 19. Today, we begin the book of 1 Maccabees. So let's start with a little historical background. Following the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC, his vast empire, stretching from Greece to India, faced an unexpected power vacuum. This caused great confusion and fragmentation within the empire itself. Rising from the chaos and conflict, key generals divided Alexander's empire into provinces. The two provinces, which affected the Jewish people most during that period of turmoil, were the Seleucids, who secured Syria and Babylonia in the north, and the Ptolemies, who ruled Egypt in the south. This left the Jewish people placed directly between these two warring provinces. From approximately 300 to 200 BC, the Ptolemaic kingdom ruled Judea. The Ptolemaic rule brought some peace to the land. However, tribute, or taxation to the empire, was a tremendous burden on the people. This was also the period when the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible, may have been translated. After defeating the Ptolemies in 198 BC, a Seleucid ruler, Antiochus III, took control of the region and brought the Jewish people under Seleucid control. In 190 BC, a mere 8 years later, the Seleucid lost the Battle of Magnesia to the Romans. The loss incurred by the Seleucid army resulted in a treaty which sent one of Antiochus's sons, Antiochus IV, to Rome as a hostage to ensure compliance by the Seleucids. Antiochus IV spent approximately 14 years in Rome living under house arrest. However, he was able to study in Roman institutions and form influential connections. The time Antiochus IV spent in Rome shaped his admiration for Roman culture and served as a model for his Hellenizing policies that we will see in 1 Maccabees. After the assassination of his brother Seleucus IV in 175 BC, Antiochus IV was exchanged for his nephew Demetrius I, which allowed Antiochus IV to return to Syria, where he seized the throne amid internal chaos. Antiochus IV added the title Epiphanes to his name, which meant God manifest. He was exceptionally ruthless and unleashed a period of grievous religious tyranny on the Jewish people. This was not just a national or political problem. Antiochus's brutality spread like a virus into every city and village, marked by terrible persecution, death, poverty, cultural annihilation, and extreme taxation. Some in the Jewish community, however, assimilated to the Hellenism or Greek culture imposed by Antiochus, as we see in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 12 through 15. Here it reads, "This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king, who authorized them to observe the ordinances of the Gentiles. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem, according to Gentile custom, and removed the marks of circumcision, and abandoned the Holy Covenant. They joined with the Gentiles, and sold themselves to do evil." As a result, a revolt was started by a priest named Mattathias and his 5 sons and grandson. The family was known both as the Maccabees and the Hasmoneans. The name Maccabeus, found in chapter 2, verse 4, may be a nickname meaning the hammerer. The book of 1 Maccabees was likely written around the priesthood of Simon's son, John Hyrcanus, around 134 BC, and outlines the story of the Maccabean revolt and the beginning of a brief period of Jewish independence and freedom from Seleucid oppression. Finally, although 1 Maccabees is not considered part of the Hebrew Bible by the Jewish people, the origin of the Jewish feast of Hanukkah is described here in chapter 4, verse 36 through 59. Turning now to the Gospel of John. In chapter 4, we are told by John that Jesus had to travel through Samaria. Now, the preferred route taken by Jews in the first century to go from Jerusalem to Galilee would be to travel around Samaria. But why? Who were the Samaritans? As we will read later in the trail, the northern kingdom, known as Israel or Ephraim, was completely annihilated by the Assyrians in 722 BC. However, they did not just conquer the nation, they also destroyed the Jewish culture and corrupted Jewish bloodlines by intermarrying with Jewish survivors. Therefore, the Samaritans were despised by the Jews living in Galilee and Judea. They were considered outcasts and half-breeds. In fact, in Ezra chapter 4, we are told that when the Samaritans, called the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin, asked if they could help with the rebuilding of the temple after its destruction by the Babylonians, the Jews rejected their offer. Yet Jesus does not avoid going to this region. Instead, he travels directly through it. Along the way, Jesus and his disciples stop at a Samaritan city called Sychar. About noon, in the heat of the day, Jesus sits by the well of Jacob when he is approached by a woman. Beginning in verse 7, a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans. Why is this unnamed Samaritan woman coming to Jacob's well at noon? Typically, water would be gathered from the well in the cool of the day. However, this would also mean that the well would be busy. Therefore, by coming to the well at noon, it is likely that she was avoiding being seen. She is an outcast, living among outcasts. Yet Jesus engages her. Turning to verse 10, Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water." As we saw in Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus, this woman also misunderstands what Jesus is saying to her. She is focused on the physical presence of the well, and not the spiritual truth that Jesus is referring to. On the surface, she is excited to find water that does not require her to journey to the well each day. But there may be more here than just the daily physical effort of fetching water. Perhaps she is avoiding something else entirely. As with Nicodemus, the Jewish scholar and leader, Jesus is talking about something far greater than the water we drink when we are thirsty or what we use to clean our hands. Jesus is offering living water, water that is moving. Unlike water that stands in a puddle or stagnates in the bottom of a well, living water is moving and is purified by that motion. And the spiritual comparison that Jesus is offering here is not unfamiliar. In the words of the prophet Jeremiah in chapter 2, verse 13, "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living water, and dug out cisterns for themselves, cracked cisterns, that can hold no water. This Samaritan woman seems trapped by her past and how she sees herself. When she looks at her reflection in a pool of water, she sees what everyone else sees: a woman who is forced to go to the well at noon. So Jesus tries another approach. Beginning in verse 16, Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come back." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." Jesus' statement here, "Go call your husband," is a lot like fishing. Jesus makes a very simple statement to lure her into facing a deeper truth, and she takes the bait. She admits that she does not have a husband, but neglects the larger truth. She has had 5 husbands, and now she is living with a man to whom she is not married. Perhaps this is the very truth that she has been trying to avoid by coming to the well at noon. So, how does she respond when faced with the truth of her situation? Verse 19, the woman said to him, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you say that the place where people must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming, and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will proclaim all things to us." Jesus said to her, "I am he, the one who is speaking to you." On the surface, this seems like a distraction, and perhaps it is. Instead of facing the truth that Jesus has revealed, she turns to the difference between the places of worship for the Samaritans and the Jewish people. Yes, they worship God in different places, Gerizim and Jerusalem. But Jesus quickly turns the conversation back to her and the spiritual reality of our worship. True worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. Often, I think we read past this phrase, "in spirit and truth," at least far too quickly. I have asked myself, whose spirit and whose truth is Jesus referring to here? Do we worship in our spirit or by God's spirit? Perhaps it's both. But what about truth? Do we worship in God's truth? That is, do we worship the true God? Yes, of course. But what about our truth? The truth of who we really are beneath a mirror's reflection, like the truth that this Samaritan woman is trying to avoid. Perhaps Jesus is pointing out that the heart of true worship begins with our heart as well, our willingness to be honest about ourselves before God, not to hide our true selves behind the outward appearance of worship or religiosity, to face our own truth as God sees our true selves. And then, once again, in verse 25, it seems that the Samaritan woman tries to change the subject to focus on the arrival of the Messiah. And once again, Jesus brings the conversation back to her. Jesus responds, "I am he." In Greek, he says, "Ego eimi," literally, "I am." As we discussed in our exploration of Exodus, "I am" is a statement of God's identity and divine name, Yahweh. Also notice that Jesus reveals his divine connection to God, ego eimi, I am, to this unnamed Samaritan woman, this outcast, and not the Jewish leader, Nicodemus. Now, throughout John's Gospel, this phrase, ego eimi, I am, is used as part of Jesus' revelation of his divine identity. Therefore, we will continue to watch for places where this phrase is used throughout the Gospel. Now, upon hearing this from Jesus, she immediately leaves her water jar and returned to the city to tell others. Look at her proclamation, beginning in verse 28. Then the woman left her water jar and went back to the city. She said to the people, "Come and see a man who told me everything I have ever done. He cannot be the Messiah, can he?" They left the city and were on their way to him. First, come and see. This is the same invitation that Andrew gives to Peter and Philip to Nathanael. And now she makes this same invitation to the city. Come and see. But then she adds, he told me everything I have ever done. What she was ashamed of, the reason that she was at the well at noon, she now proclaims to the entire town. Now, of course, they already knew her situation. They knew the truth of why she was going to the well at noon. And she knew the truth of her situation. But now, she has faced that truth, the truth about herself and the truth of God. Now, having met Jesus, the opinion of the townsfolk no longer mattered, because God himself knew her and all that she had done, and was still willing to meet with her, talk with her, and offer her living water. When we meet God and realize that God knows us, the real us, and is still willing to be with us, every other opinion falls away. Our lives are now lived for an audience of one. Finally, notice the comparison between the story of the Samaritan woman and Nicodemus. Nicodemus, the educated leader of the Jewish people, seems to remain undecided about Jesus' message after their conversation. However, this unnamed outcast, this Samaritan woman, leaves what she is doing and goes immediately and tells her story. The outcast becomes the example of faith and of our response to God. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.